once you put that mask on, you run the chance of not just taking the disguise and acting as that character, but becoming it in full.
Welcome to the Monster Guys podcast, Halloween in July edition. We have some very special treats and perhaps some tricks in store for you tonight. Now please remove your heads and your arms. Oops, I mean your hats and your coats and your shawls and leave them on the rack. Now please be so kind as to join us in the dead center of the ballroom. Pay no mind to her, she simply lost her head. Now watch your step around these little fellas. They're simply here to trip you up. You do have some goodies for our trick-or-treaters, don't you? You wouldn't want to upset them, now would you?
Michael, be careful. Watch your step here.
Where is this? Where are we?
Watch out. Oh my gosh, Michael, watch out. Look.
What do you see? What is it?
I spy with my little eye. It's Halloween in July.
So what you're saying is we need to find a goat mask.
What I'm saying is that I'm going to my neighbor's house tomorrow, and I'm going to be dressed up as a goat. I'm going to enter and do a goat dance for him.
A goat dance.
And I'm going to see how far I get.
What is a goat dance exactly?
You will see perhaps tomorrow, because I might be goat dancing all the way back to our house with him chasing me. I don't know.
Ooh, maybe it's because we were talking about masks and we upset one of the spirits.
Maybe something got upset because we are... I mean, it is bizarre. And just sitting here adjusting the levels are readjusting themselves. Welcome to Halloween in July on the Monster Guys podcast. This is week 2. Oh, the masks we wear. Pretty excited about this one, Michael. How about you?
Very excited for this one, as always. This topic in particular is very magical.
Yeah, it is. And just as a note, editor's note, you've been sick for the past couple of days, so your voice is kind of wonky, as they would say. Some of our friends across the pond would say.
Yeah.
And I got sick pretty bad, actually, the day of our last podcast, and stayed that way until maybe I think just yesterday or into this morning, and you kind of overlapped with me there. So apologies ahead of time if our voices get a little thin, but we're going to move ahead with this and make it happen.
It's okay. Richard's voice should help even us out.
Richard will definitely even us out. That being said, we have 2 guests on tonight's show, and very pleased to say that Richard Martin, the Fear Merchant, will be back with us tonight, as well as Icy Sedgwick, who some of you may remember did an episode with us a couple months ago about the mythology and the folklore of the Crossroads. A very popular episode for us here on the Monster Guys podcast. and she's back with us. So we have two guests with us tonight and a great deal of ground to cover with regards to masks. This episode is sponsored by the Monster Guys Patreon page. If you go to patreon.com/the Monster Guys, would really appreciate it if you dropped a tip in the tip jar there, maybe just for the cost of a soda or a coffee or one of those famous donuts at one of those specialty donut shops that are so popular these days. Maybe just throw one of those into the tip jar for us, and it'd be a huge deal to us. Michael, a lot of people ask me, why are we even doing Patreon, especially if we've only got a handful of supporters now, and all great things begin with small beginnings.
It's very deep.
Well, it is deep, but it's true.
It's almost as deep as some of those crazy donut shops.
Yeah, some of those crazy donut shops. But yeah, we start small, and we do have a great deal planned for Patreon, and some very special things to be rolling out towards the end of the year especially, and into next year. Our exclusive content is increasing, and really it's just going to be a place for fun and an opportunity for us to do what we're doing without having to do a whole lot of commercials or sponsors outside of our network of interest. I think that's important to us. The more we do the Monster Guys podcast, the more I don't want to really be selling some abstract product, just to pay the bills or get a new piece of studio equipment. I'd like us to do that in-house, and I'd like us to do that by way of doing what we love and creating stories and content that you, our listeners, are enjoying. So we do appreciate those of you who are supporting us right now, and appreciate all of our future patrons. Just thank you so much. And if you get a chance, go over there and check that out, patreon.com/the Monster Guys. Drop $1, $2, or $5, or $10 in the tip jar for us, and it would mean a big deal to us. It's also one of the 3 ways that you can get your name on the list for one of our giveaways this month. We are doing a couple of big box giveaways with some really cool stuff, and I think, Michael, I'm going to record a mini episode about halfway through Halloween in July, just to show a lot of the things that are in, or talk about a lot of things that are in the giveaway boxes, because those are pretty exciting. But Patreon support is one way. Signing up for our newsletter on themonsterguys.com is another way you can get your name on the list for those giveaways. And the third way is to go to iTunes and rate and review. Give us some good news, some positive review on iTunes for the Monster Guys podcast. If you enjoy this episode or any of our episodes, what we've put out so far, it'd be awesome if you could do that for us. It means a lot, and it helps people find us. So those are the 3 ways you can get your name on the list for our giveaway that will be done toward the end of the month. But tonight, we dive into the topic of masks, as we've already said, with 2 guests in waiting. Michael, let's get started. Halloween in July, Part 2, Oh, the Masks We Wear. Michael, last week I asked you for a favorite Halloween memory. We talked through a couple of those good times from Halloween's gone by. This week, let me ask you this. We do a number of family traditions for the month or the season of Halloween, and we actually start a little bit earlier than October, but kind of like how a lot of people do Christmas, we have some Halloween traditions as well. What is your favorite family Halloween tradition that we do during that season? And a lot of people don't even know this about us, that we have a number of very specific, almost religious type now traditions, or I should say traditions that we practice religiously during this season. What's one of your favorite family Halloween traditions that we practice?
I guess for me, that would actually have to be one of the newer traditions, or maybe not newer, but one of the traditions that we've started since after Nathaniel was born. And that is our indoors personal tricks and treats. Not quite the same as trick-or-treating,
right.
But this is a tradition where we each get a trick for each person and a treat for each person. So it ends up being kind of a fun romp of gag gifts sometimes.
Yes, it is.
But sometimes we have some really cool ones in there as well that kind of stick with us. I think my favorite trick had to be the bag of fake spiders that I gave you.
That was horrifying. Terrible trick.
It was awesome. So it was a paper bag, and then I had taped glittering black spiders to the
inside of like tissue paper.
Yeah, it was in the tissue paper, and I had done it in such a way that when you moved certain parts of the tissue paper with the tape, it was supposed to facilitate the crawling of spiders. So,
And it facilitated it well.
so I think that's one of the only times I've seen you jump, and that was worth it.
Yeah. I don't really get moved by too much, especially in the scare factor, but that was terrifying because it did. When I opened up that package, that, you know how light tissue paper is and how well it crumples, it certainly looked like this mini horde of spiders were crawling out of the tissue paper with me. And I didn't almost lose my cool there. I just about lost my candy as well.
It was definitely fun. And that's the thing I like about that specific tradition is, we can all get each other something nice, the treats, but it also gives us a chance to be more mischievous with each other.
Yeah.
And I feel like old Christmas traditions used to do stuff like that, but over the years it's just become, gifts for everybody.
Yeah, it has. And I think along the same line, my favorite tradition that we do during this season is our Halloween tree. We started this many years ago. We actually put up a tree and decorate it with Halloween ornaments. Some of the things that we've made, some pieces of Halloween art that we've commissioned. We top it with a jack-o'-lantern. It's obviously got all the Halloween lights and everything. It started small and it's grown up a little bit. Who knows? Maybe we'll go to full trees at some point. We've even done artistic trees where we've actually gone out and taken a big limb from a tree that has fallen and mounted it, spray painted it, and put all kinds of decorations on it. Actually looks something like just walked off the set of Nightmare Before Christmas or something. So we've done them different ways, and under that tree each year, as we said, each one of us in the family produces a trick and a treat gift for each other. And it's just a lot of fun. We sit down after we go trick-or-treating, open up our gifts, or do that before we head out trick-or-treating or to costume contest or something. And it's just a lot of fun. And I would encourage people to find your own traditions. This kind of stuff isn't reserved just for Christmas. You can do it, Halloween as well. And it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of cool decorations and ways to surprise each other with gifts and
spiders.
And spiders. And then, of course, you do your normal costume contests and parties and trick-or-treating. And it just makes for a really fun month of activities. So talk to me about masks, Michael. A lot of people, when they think masks at Halloween, they think, those old plastic masks with the cutout eyes and that rubber band type string that goes around the back. I think of things like Casper the Ghost mask and Strawberry Shortcake. That was a creepy one to me.
Yeah, I could definitely see that being creepy.
That was bad. One of my favorite masks at Halloween, of course, was when Star Wars came out and you could get Yoda or Chewie or any of those kind of masks. I don't know. What do you remember? Most of the ones that you've known growing up, you've made yourself or we've made in-house. But used to, we had those really creepy plastic character masks.
I remember as a kid, of course, there's always the obligatory demon mask, which you see in every Halloween store.
Yep,
It might have like horns protruding out of the neck or something. But I remember as a kid coming across a werewolf mask. And it was back early 90s, so it wasn't fancy underworld lichen
right.
mask or anything, but it was very hairy and it definitely had that rubber mask smell about it. And it came with the claws. And I remember I was looking through a box of just toys and other miscellaneous objects, and I came across that, and that thing actually freaked me out. Even without somebody in it, the mask itself was enough to stick with me for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely the mark of a good Halloween mask, is if it can stay with you all those years later.
Yeah, well, the ones that stayed with me are the ones that I sweat inside, and they became all like moist and moldy inside. It was I hated those kind of masks.
That pumpkin head we always talk about. I usually had to braid my hair to fit in that, just because I have thick, kind of frizzy hair sometimes, and if it's not braided, it would expand in that head.
Into the pumpkin essence.
So even with braided hair, I would always get out the then sweaty chunks of pumpkin flesh. So
that's
there's
nasty.
a nice little
I
piece
did
of info
post a
for you guys.
picture of one of your original pumpkin masks, the big jack-o'-lantern that you carved out. It's a real pumpkin, and those
Real heavy too.
Yeah, very heavy. You put those over the top. It took quite a bit of maneuvering to get that on your shoulders and to keep it there through the night. But I put a picture of that up on Twitter, I think, last week. So go back and check that out. Pretty cool.
I don't know. I think when you're talking about Halloween masks, there's definitely a tradition there that has evolved into something else in modern day. But I don't know. One of my favorite things about Halloween is going to a Halloween store and going up to that back wall where they have that assortment of, some could be just cool like a robot mask, but then you probably have the weird Easter Bunny mask up there that's terrifying to look at, and all of the rubber,
like the horse head and the duck head, and
I'm thinking of the William Shatner mask. My brain's slipping.
Michael Myers,
that one. Yeah. We just saw Baby Driver, and they had a pretty funny riff on that mask.
And I love going to costume shops. We like to go in and look at all that kind of stuff, and then go in and press all of the press here buttons for all of the animatronics, and
those things are terrifying.
I guess if you're weak of soul.
I'm still I'm still creeped out by animatronics.
I had a lot of fun last year with a lot of those animatronics, and of course live actors. Last year you and I went to Orlando's Universal's Halloween Horror Nights again. We hadn't been in a few years, and we went back again last year, and it was pretty cool because they had a lot of folklore themed areas, like with the Banshee and different things like that. And then they had a lot of really cool houses last year based on some classic characters and classic folklore, and that was a lot of fun. So all of that wrapped up. I mean, haunted houses. We did a couple haunted houses, haunted hayrides last year with some friends, costume shops, checking out the masks, trick-or-treating. A lot of good times at Halloween. I hope everybody's looking forward to that time of year again because it is nearly upon us. Hopefully Halloween in July right now is giving you a little bit of a refresher looking forward to autumn and October and Halloween. Michael, let's go to Japan. Very interesting tradition of masks in Japan. You and I have actually hand created a number of yokai, Japanese monster masks, but Japan has a rich tradition when it comes to masks. Talk to me about that.
It definitely does. We've talked about this a little bit on the show before. I think the most obvious example is always the Hanya, or the old mountain hag who puts on the mask to scare people. But because of her wicked spirit, she actually fuses with that mask and she can't take it off, and she becomes that demon. This is also similar to the story of the king of demons, Shutendoji, who we've had a couple story podcasts about, and of course we write about that in Charlie Sullivan book 4, The Dragon Gate. But going beyond those, that whole idea, that concept continues from there. It's very rich in Japanese culture that these masks will turn you into something else. And it's a common thing that we see throughout cultures, because obviously when we put on a mask, when we put on a Halloween mask, we become that costume, we become that character. What I was saying earlier about a very magical episode.
Unless you're drunk, and then you just become a drunk person inside of a mask.
That's very true, yeah.
Which is possibly even more scary.
I was going to say a very bad combo at the end of the night. But no, there is a very strong idea that once you put that mask on, you run the chance of not just taking the disguise and acting as that character, but becoming it in full. There's a story, a dance in Kabuki theater called Kagami Jishi. Sorry for the slow Japanese pronunciation. The sick nose doesn't want to go super fast there, but the story basically is very similar, but it stands out a little bit. And it's interesting because this girl in the story doesn't actually put the mask on this time, but there's a lion mask that she finds in a room. She's told to go practice her dance in a separate room alone. And in this room, she finds a wooden lion mask with a moving jaw. And she's a very timid character. She's very modest and quiet. The way that this unfolds on stage is pretty neat. She takes this very hesitant approach, or the actor does, and then when they find that mask, that character's kind of drawn toward the mask, they pick it up, and very quickly you see a change in personality. And what's happening in the story is that there is a spirit of a lion inside that mask, and it actually slowly possesses her. We've talked a little bit about animal spirits and possession in Japanese folklore as well, like the kitsune as they kind of enter into the pores or under the fingernails and take over. A similar thing happens here where the lion actually completely takes over her, and that dance becomes a very erratic and crazy and passionate dance. And then you see a couple butterflies pass on the stage, and it chases those butterflies back to its den until that spirit of the lion is satiated. So that whole idea, to me, is very powerful. And as we see, it's not just about putting that mask on. Masks for a lot of cultures, I think, are very powerful and magical objects to themselves, where they can house all sorts of things, whether they're good or bad. And if you're not careful, they'll take you over.
Yeah, the idea or the belief or this sentiment that you speak of with the spirit possession through the mask is not exclusive to Japan. I mean, this is a phenomenon and a belief that, rolls the world over throughout the centuries. And it's to me, one of the most fascinating ideas about masks themselves is the old saying is you are what you eat. In this sense, you are what you wear. You become what you wear. And I think it is a powerful testament to belief and to cultures and history the world over. Just like anything else, when we put on those costumes or masks at Halloween for fun, sometimes we forget the history and the tradition from where that came from. And we wonder why children go nuts when they put on a mask. Well, it's not just the candy.
Yeah. I was just about to say, it's very true for the individual wearing the mask, and it's also true for the people on the other side that are looking at you.
Yeah.
The Japanese yokai train, or, haunted houses in general, but there's an event of sorts, I guess, in Japan called the yokai train.
Right.
Where actors and craftsmen will get together and make these fantastic yokai costumes, put them on. Some are like really cool puppetry, some are just simple masks. But parents will bring their children to the train, they'll sit down, and then these actors and performers will come through the car. And if you watch the videos, those kids, they're not having a good time.
They're terrifying.
Yeah, and it's a reminder that while you may put on a mask and become that character, as far as anybody knows, as far as anybody looking at you knows, you actually are that character.
Yeah.
Any haunted house you go to, you'll see people scream and run away from a room that a very convincing actor is wearing just nothing but a good mask and a costume.
Yeah, and for the sake of people who don't know the term yokai, I know we do yokai podcasts. We tell stories about yokai. We've interviewed experts on yokai on the podcast, but for a simplified definition, yokai are Japanese monsters, Japanese spirits. And that is a very simplified version of the definition. So take it as that. But just imagine, thousands upon thousands of different types of monsters, both great and small, that are roaming the Japanese countryside or beyond that spiritual veil, so to speak, in their existence. But a lot of times in Japanese culture, with festivals, with writings, with things like what you're talking about, the yokai train, which is a type of haunted house event, people will create masks and costumes to represent the yokai or these little monsters, these little demons, these little spirits, and they'll scare little children or they'll scare adults for that matter.
Oh yeah, they were
with their stories and with their exhibition.
They were very popular, of course, in kabuki theater. A lot of the masks that you see from Japan, the Hanya mask and the tengu, the long-nosed.
Tengu, that's my favorite in yokai lore, is the tengu.
That red-faced, long-nosed goblin of sorts. Those kabuki theaters, they were very effective, and in my opinion, they still are in the art of storytelling. They're very creepy at times, and at the same time, very emotional, which is amazing considering the fact that they're not moving faces, they're just masks.
Yeah. A cool little tidbit there on the masks from Japanese culture, and we've got other places from around the world to discover masks and their history and their lore. The whole idea of becoming also reminds me of the famous movie with Jim Carrey not too many years ago here called The Mask.
Yeah.
And, basically he finds this mask, and when he puts it on, he becomes that character. As wild and mischievous or dangerous or kind as he was the spirit of that mask.
Yeah.
And a similar concept. So very interesting all around.
And we'll definitely talk a bit more about that because like we said before, that's not confined to any one culture, and it's a pretty common thread.
Yeah. So let's switch gears right now. Let's go check in with Richard Martin, the Fear Merchant, and let's talk to him a little bit about masks. All right, we're back again this week with Richard Martin, the Fear Merchant. Richard, thanks for hanging out with us this month during our Halloween in July. For those of you who may not have caught last week's episode, Richard is the host of the Bizarre Cast. You can find him at the Fear Merchant pretty much anywhere. Just go to thefearmerchant.com. You can find all of his contact and his podcast. Great show. Keeps getting better and better every week. I think you're recording now weekly, aren't you, Richard?
I try to record weekly, but I still release fortnightly. But thanks again for having me on this week. It's been a blast. Last episode that came out was quite fun. I did enjoy it, and I'm sure this will be another blast this week. It's really fun having Halloween in July, because Halloween is my favorite holiday of the year. So glad to be celebrating it with you guys in the middle of the summer.
Absolutely. It's always a good time for Halloween and never too early to get started. So those of you who wait till like October 30th to get your costumes ready, we're hoping this is a point of inspiration for you to start early to get your costumes ready this year. I know so many people that start talking about their costumes in January, but then get them ready on October 28th. Then they just put on like a bikini or something to go get drunk in.
That kind of sounds like me getting on the bikini.
Last week we talked about scarecrows. This week we're talking about masks, the masks that you wear. And similar to scarecrows, talking about how they mimic humanity or mirror humanity sometimes, masks reflect our humanity as well. They can also reflect our fascination with putting ourselves in somebody else's shoes, whether that be a human, a monster, or an animal. Talk to us about masks. Richard, from your point of view, what's your favorite kind of masks? What do they mean to you? What do you see? What do you interpret when you see people wearing masks?
Now, off the bat, when you say to me mask, I think something along the lines of definitely Halloween straight away, but something maybe a little bit more sinister. Now, myself and my buddies, we had a great tradition for about 5-6 years. There was this unbelievable costume party every Halloween, and everyone was dressed up in character. And the whole mask thing, you can hide behind the mask. You're a different person when you're behind a mask. And I think that's something very unique, I suppose, definitely in human terms. If you're an animal, there's no animals that wear masks as far as I can tell, but masks have been dated as far back as 7,000 BC, so people are always trying to hide or disguise themselves in terms of a mask, but it can kind of convey, I suppose, someone's intention depending on what the mask is. Would you agree?
Oh, definitely.
Convey or even hide would be, I guess with movies, I hate to go to a slasher movie right off the bat, but I guess with movies like Scream or even Friday the 13th.
Yeah, Friday the 13th, definitely. Like, that's just a hockey mask, which is, something supposed to be that isn't really sinister, but when someone's coming after you with a machete, with a hockey mask on, it's very foreboding.
Yeah,
it is.
And again, we spoke last week about the uncanny valley. If a mask is not quite something that's human, it puts you off. Because I think the whole psychology of that would be you need to assess the situation, whether it's going to be dangerous or not, in a historical sense, where we had to assess threats. So if someone is concealing their true intentions behind a mask, be it figurative or alliterative, you just need to kind of, on the spin of a dime, need to know what the intentions of the person is. So we see basically in a lot of media now that masks usually convey some sort of imminent violence. The movies like The Purge, where masks have become a huge part of that franchise, and they got more and more elaborate as the series went on. And as we said, Friday the 13th and sort of other media around. There was video games lately like Payday 2, which you were bank robbers and you wore masks. And then there was Hotline Miami, which I've been playing all today, actually, where you wear different like rubber chicken masks, different dog masks, and you go around killing Russian mafia in masks. So there's masks bloody everywhere.
Yeah, they're definitely used to hide and conceal intentions, and for the most part in our popular culture, they represent evil or something dangerous. Michael, you and I will talk about it a bit more in the episode outside of our conversation with Richard as well, and some will be talking with Icy as well a little bit about this. But I believe that masks can also be more of an expansion of awareness or an expansion of consciousness, not necessarily always for evil, but sometimes for good, or just a culturally or ritualistically even-keeled purpose, not good or bad. So I don't think it's all bad, but I think in our popular culture and our media today, we definitely have this evil intention hidden behind something we can't fully define or grasp with regards to masks.
Well, definitely. I mean, going back to the origins of Halloween, masks, as we said in our last, well, I guess not our last Halloween episode anymore, but our Halloween episode from last year, it was kind of like a bug be gone for monsters. It was something to scare other monsters away.
Mm-hmm.
If you go back even farther in history into some tribal cultures, I think the Inuit Native Americans have some of my favorite mask traditions. They believed that animals had two forms, that every living creature was created with a human form and an animal form. And they, in response, would create animal masks that they could wear in order to evoke their own sort of second form.
Mm-hmm.
They believed them to be very powerful nature spirits, and they would use that to either appeal to them or to try to, like you said, expand their own awareness and put themselves in that mindset. So it is interesting to see how it's kind of come full circle or maybe half circle.
Yeah.
And gone from a fairly benevolent utility to something that is very sinister at times.
Richard, you said you've never seen animals wearing a mask. Have you never seen The Lion King? Have you never watched any Disney movie?
I have, but
okay.
I suppose the wide definition of mask, could you say like a muzzle is a mask? Because I suppose there's face masks, which you would wear, which are
that's
protective.
True, yeah, the muzzle.
Yeah.
So, I suppose masks in general, they seem to transcend all cultures. Like, every culture seems to have some sort of a mask going. But there's also, I suppose, different reasons for wearing a mask. It could be for medical purposes, protective purposes, for disguise, as you said. It could be occupational hazards, gas mask, oxygen mask, sports masks, as in helmets,
yep,
visors, masks of shame, death masks. There's masks for everything.
You said medical. I think, to me, one of the more creepy masks in history that also served the medical purpose was that
the plague doctor.
Yeah, so many people use that today as a fear-based mechanism, and you look back historically, it wasn't for fear, it was for protection.
But it certainly evoked it.
It certainly evoked fear, and I feel for the patients who had to look at that when it came in the room.
And you just look at those, they look ridiculous. I wonder that they actually work, though. What was the meaning behind it? That you weren't smelling in death or something?
Yeah, I don't think they worked, but I could be wrong.
Well, I mean, back then it was before...
I guess it just took the toxic air longer to get to your nose, but...
It was before medicine had really been narrowed down to something that was a good...
A science.
I don't want to say science, because, they had their ways of
sure.
doing things, but they weren't very exact with everything, so it was kind of hit or miss back then.
Michael, what's your favorite mask if you were to pick one out of popular culture or history? And you've got masks all over the place. You like to hang masks, and a lot of our personal pranks on each other involve masks that are suspended in air between a doorway, and you just walk face first into that mask, scare the crap out of you. What's your favorite mask?
I was going to say, we're sitting in a room that has 6 masks currently hanging up, so it's kind of a hard pick, but I guess the mask that I grew up with would probably have to be the Phantom of the Opera mask, and
that's cheating. You took my answer.
Well, I think it's interesting because I guess the original mask didn't have the half mask, but the mask that most people think of with the Phantom of the Opera has, half of the face covered. So it shows that duality, almost a Jekyll and a Hyde in one person at the same time. And
all right, so it's not totally cheating because I was going to say Phantom of the Opera, but I was going to go Act 2 when he comes into the masquerade
with the mask.
Yeah, the full mask and the wardrobe. That was my favorite mask, even though the iconic Phantom of the Opera mask is always on the top shelf of my heart, but that Act 2 Masquerade mask to me stands out as my favorite.
Well, that brings up a good question too, and it's something that I wanted to ask later on, or kind of gear toward or lean towards later on. Would you consider a costume an extension of the mask? I mean, typically we think of masks as just on the face, but we're talking about Halloween masks, and typically that includes an entire costume.
Yeah, I would think so. I think at least as an extension, a costume isn't necessarily a mask, even though by definition it is. I mean, I see what you're saying. Well, yeah, I think it could definitely be considered a mask.
There's a question later on that we'll ask that I think kind of adds to that question. So.
What do you think, Richard?
I would definitely say a costume is an extension of a mask. As I mentioned at the very start there, that we used to go to the annual sort of meetup of Halloween enthusiasts, because they used to have a competition for the best costume, but the costume itself was more of an extension of the mask, as we were alluding to. Mm-hmm. And I usn't normally wear a mask because the reason I wouldn't wear a mask is the mask is a barrier between you and your next pint.
Man, I thought you were going to get really deep and philosophical there.
Yeah, I thought you were going to get really deep on us there.
As you were saying, it was like, he's going to say it's a barrier between him and the audience. But
yeah.
No, I was being a stereotypical Irishman there, saying that I love to quaff down a few pints.
Perfect.
No, but definitely, like, I did enjoy dressing up, and more so maybe like face paint, etc. I'll send you on a few photos of my past endeavors of dressing up. But
now, can we post those along with the episode?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Be careful what you send. That bikini shot, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that was the year Borat came out, maybe. No, I think the only mask I remember wearing around Halloween was, I'm showing my true neckbeard colors here. I had the Guy Fawkes mask, and myself and a friend back in 2010 when they were doing the Occupy Wall Street, Occupy sort of London carry-on, that we were dressing up as the anonymous guys wearing a suit and the Guy Fawkes mask. That's a fairly cool mask, which I think has been ruined by sort of alt-right and, I suppose, anarchy-driven movements now. It's kind of ruined the whole coolness of the V for Vendetta and Guy Fawkes aspect of that mask.
Well, Richard, is there a mask historically or in pop culture that stands out to you, maybe in a movie or a game or something, that you would say is your favorite or most terrifying?
I'm not too sure, to be honest with you. I think masks for me, I suppose, as obviously we've nearly missed it completely. There was the movie The Mask with Jim Carrey.
Right.
And that was like, was it a South American mask and he turned into the mask or whatever?
Yeah, I think he was in Miami in that movie, and a lot of the Cuban culture down there.
The mask itself was...
So that's the one that kind of sticks out.
Oh, the mask itself, yeah.
Yeah, and then I suppose there's the man in the iron mask, like Dr. Doom and all that kind of stuff, which is a kind of cool mask. And you were mentioning the Phantom of the Opera. And then I suppose I'm going to have to mention, I mentioned last week, it was the follow-up game to The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, was Majora's Mask. So the whole thing with that game was there was a plethora of masks where you could put them on and you'd actually assume I suppose you'd embody what the mask represented. So we'd say if it was a fish mask, you put on the mask, you turn into a fish. Or if there was a dog mask and then you put it on, you turn into a dog. So that was a little bit taking the concept further of a mask where you're trying to imitate what maybe the mask is. You would actually turn into them as opposed to pretending.
Great franchise, by the way. I believe it was it Majora's Mask or Ocarina of Time that goes through the 5 stages of grief?
That was Majora's Mask, I believe, because there's a big theory that you are actually dead and you're going through the 5 stages of grief at that.
Again, that game is bright and colorful and happy at times, and other times it just goes way into some deep, dark, creepy places.
Indeed, I don't think I ever finished it. It was a bit too creepy for me back in the day.
All right, very good. Richard, thanks again for being with us this week. I can't wait to talk to you next week about jack-o'-lanterns.
Great, I can't wait. So, guys, you can catch me on thefearmerchant.com or at thefearmerchant on Twitter and get on the Bizarrecast and listen to me, if you like this voice, talking to a lot of cool people.
There you go. All right. right, awesome. Always good to hear from Richard Martin, the Fear Merchant. Again, we'll have his information in our show notes. Always a good time. And in just a few more moments, we'll switch gears and go talk to Icy Sedgwick from northern England, and where the weather must be much nicer than it is here.
Definitely.
Oh my gosh, it is so freaking hot here. I'm so glad we're talking about Halloween because it just cools me off a little bit thinking about the fall and about the leaves falling and that cool breeze coming in with the harvest moon high up in the sky.
It was very poetic.
Well, I got to get away from this heat for a minute. It's nuts.
Yeah, even at night right now, it's a little unbearable.
Oh my gosh, I was melting. Just went out for dinner with my wife tonight, and I mean, it was almost miserable just getting to and from the restaurant, and we stopped in to the library to grab something on the way, and I thought, I'm just going to die. I'm going to die between the building and the vehicle. And it was, 7, 8, and 9 o'clock at night, and it was nuts. So I'm thinking about Halloween and having cool thoughts, happy thoughts, less triple-digit heat thoughts, which it is right now. By the way, how you holding up over there, Michael? This summer cold or whatever it is you've got was pretty intense. You doing all right over there?
My head feels like there's a black hole inside of it.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So, I don't know.
Something you find in Stranger Things season 2 or something.
Yeah, that's another thing to look for in Halloween season.
Yeah, definitely. October 31st, Stranger Things 2. I can't wait for that. They've got some pretty cool teasers going on right now.
And they're good teasers. They're satisfying, and at the same time, they do the exact thing that they're meant to do and make you not satisfied.
That's their job. Michael, while we were talking to Richard, you brought up briefly the Inuit. Let's expand on that a little bit. Go there with me, and let's talk about the Inuit.
Okay, just to recap, the Inuit believed that every living animal had two forms: a human form underneath, and then the actual animal form as well. This is demonstrated really well in the story of a shaman who reportedly was going over the crest of a hill and saw at the lake below a heron. And he approached the heron. The heron looked at him, and according to what he was saying, it raised its head up and revealed, it basically pushed aside the feathers at its breast and revealed the human face within, which is pretty fantastic imagery, if you ask me.
Yeah,
but
it is.
It's really cool.
I would turn and go the other way if I saw a heron open its chest and show me a human face.
Well, I guess I never found out what happened next, so he might have done just that. But, when they make that mask of the crane or the heron, the human face is in the breast of the bird. And the mask itself is very tall. It extends above the human head to reflect that same belief. And every face, every animal mask is designed to evoke that same imagery so that it's very subtly hidden where you can still see where the human face would be. So it's very cool. But just as we've been talking about where you put that on and you become that thing, in their beliefs, you are basically evoking those same spirits. You're getting closer to them. You're connecting to them on a deeper level. But even more than that, you have Kachinas, and I believe I'm saying that right, but these are spirits or gods, basically. They aren't necessarily big, sky deities, but they are the animated spirits within all living things, or even some things that you wouldn't think are living.
Right.
But when a youth puts a mask on of this Kachina, they literally believe that they become this spirit for that brief moment. They treat their masks because of this very carefully. There's even one mask of the plumed serpent, and every mask has its ritual about it. But this specific mask, I think, is a good example because it cannot be repainted or reused for anything else. Other masks, you might be able to, touch it up, or you might be able to reuse it for a different mask later on. But this specific mask is very sacred, and it is handled with such care that you literally can't do anything else with it. So obviously, you'd have to be very careful with that.
A great reverence, almost a worshipful reverence with regards to these masks.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you put it that way. Especially for Native American tribes, this is true.
I think what's interesting about this is previously we talked about how you put on a mask and you become, but in this belief system, it already exists. It's almost like you're not putting something on in order to become, but you're stepping into the spirit of the thing, or you're actually revealing the truth of your own nature through the mask. So it's not like you're becoming, but you already are, but you're reuniting or you're revealing the nature of the thing through that mask. So it's a very dynamic and rich belief system and tradition.
And this is not to take away from that cultural history, but I want to go back to the mask a little bit after you say that, because that's, I feel like, what was happening. As goofy as that movie was, and as much of a comedic treat for the senses as it was with Jim Carrey,
yeah,
that's basically what was happening. He was, the entire movie is talking about in the background who you really are and what mask you're presenting to the world.
Right.
When he puts that on, he's being turned into that god, and I think it's like a South American god or something. I cannot remember.
He's revealing his true nature.
Yeah, you're seeing who he truly is. Because
so he's not necessarily becoming as much as he is stepping into the revelation of his own self.
Yeah, which is pretty deep for a pretty funny movie.
Yeah, well, I think the deeper you go, the funnier you can get with a lot of things.
That's just true. Moving over very briefly to the Pacific Northwest, I wanted to bring up a story from the Tsimshian tribe, and I hope I'm saying that right.
Yeah, I think that's the Americanized version of
we'll go with
the
that.
spelling.
But this story highlights the fact that it's not just humans who use masks. Their spirits use these masks as well. So the story goes that back when the sky was dark, a chief with two sons, or there was a chief with two sons. One was a young son named One Who Walks All Over the Sky, and his older brother was walking about early. As the story goes, the younger son was sad that it was always dark outside. So he took a wooden mask and he dipped it in pitch, and then he set it on fire, and he wore this mask and would go up into the sky. And this is how they got the sun. And at night, when he would lay it down and leave the sky, he would snore, and sparks from his mask would go up and light up the sky with stars. The elder brother was jealous of this because he believed that all of his father's attention would go now to the youngest son. So he took lard and charcoal and smeared those substances on his face and would become the moon. But it's good to see because, again, we have all these stories across the world of humans becoming things with the masks they wear, or of Halloween, of people celebrating Halloween, or of mummers dancing, which we'll get to in a bit. And they become these things, but it's not just humans that do this. Like we said earlier, the Kachinas, the animals that do this, and then you have even sky deities here that do the same thing.
So from animals and humans to gods themselves that wear the masks that we speak of. So apart from the snoring part, that's quite beautiful imagery from that story. I wish there were another word other than snoring that just evokes
I don't know. I mean, I think you've got like volcano gods and stuff that I could definitely see
I get what
rumble.
you're saying. I understand the story, and it's a beautiful story. It's just the whole snoring thing.
So you've got those, and then you also have the Cherokee, who have a tradition called the booger mask dance.
Yeah, the booger masks.
And this was very interesting. I was trying to research the etymology of the word booger, and I believe it's just something that we've come to know it by in modern times.
The bogeyman. The boogeyman.
So I was trying to see what the original word
we've talked
for
about
was.
this before when we were talking about cryptids. I mean, a lot of people call Bigfoot booger in some states and some regions, and it's just a common term for the boogeyman.
Yeah, or Bigfoot even at this point, which was very interesting to me to hear him call that. But this story basically comes from an old tale of a monster called Stonecoat, whose skin was made of stone. Hard as rock. He is responsible.
Well, I would hope so if he's named Stone.
But he was responsible for all diseases known to the Cherokee. And when they burned him alive to kill him because he was a monster, he started prophesying about the fact that people would come to their lands from different places and far away, and they would try to kidnap the women and destroy their culture. And he told them how to defend themselves from this, and it was basically what became the booger mask dance. The way this dance goes is there will be people just in a house dancing, just as a social event, and a few men will leave the building and they'll come back with these what are called booger masks. And they'll start making a ruckus, they'll try to rustle up the crowd, pretend to kidnap the females in the crowd. And then kind of the host of the show, if you will stop them and ask, who are you? What are you doing here? And they'll usually say, we're from lands far away. We're passing north or we're going south. And there will be this, I believe it is in 4 different parts. There was a gentleman named Speck who actually witnessed this in the 1930s. And he was pretty detailed about it if you want to read further into it. But there are 4 different parts that this dance goes through. And basically the way it ends is that the Native American leader will try to offer a bear dance or an eagle dance to these people as a sign of honor and peace. And inevitably they'll accept it, but they will kind of mess it up in the process. They're all very obscene creatures or just raucous people, and then they'll run away and leave. But what this is actually demonstrating is that prophecy from Stonecoat, basically talking about how historically, Europeans and other cultures coming over and really messing with that culture over time. And it's the way for Cherokees, or it was the way for Cherokee people to take that in stride and still have kind of a control over it spiritually, to be able to talk about it and deal with it and then dismiss it as needed.
Very interesting storytelling and traditions and beliefs indeed. And of course, Native American tradition holds such rich set of mythology and folklore and stories and religion and practices. And we literally could go on for weeks just with Native American lore and beliefs and never be satisfied. So
very true.
Good times there. Let's change course and jump over to Northern England right now and speak with Icy Sedgwick. Our friend Icy has quite a bit to say about masks. She's actually right now involved with an academic paper on the topic of masks. So she's got some great things to say. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Icy Sedgwick back with us on the Monster Guys podcast. This week we're talking about masks, and Icy has some great insight for us on that. Icy, how are you doing?
I'm not bad, how are you?
Doing well. And how's the northern half of England these days? Last time we talked to you, we talked about the winter chill and how cold it is there. How is it now?
Well, we've just had a week of rain. And now it's just incredibly windy. So you wouldn't think it's sort of July.
Is it still cold with the wind and the rain, or is it just kind of one of those summer humid moments?
No, it's still cold.
Definitely
It's not
cold.
as cold as it was, though.
Well, I wish I could come there with you then, because it's triple-digit Fahrenheit heat over here, and it's just nasty.
Yeah, I'll try and send some of this your way.
Please do. Icy, we're all month long, as you know, we are doing Halloween in July on the Monster Guys podcast and just having some fun with that and mentally trying to cool off a little bit and look toward autumn with our holiday celebrations. So this week we're talking about masks and customs and celebrations and different things regarding masks. Because, as everybody knows, or should know, you're supposed to dress up on Halloween. If you're not dressing up in costumes and masks on Halloween, you're missing out on something. But there's something, I believe, much deeper when we talk about masks historically and from a standpoint of folklore and even ritual. And so we want to dig into that a little bit. And from what I understand, you're actually working on an academic project right now with regards to masks. What can you share about that project, and why is that so important for us today, you think?
Well, the book itself is actually on how, this is going to sound weird, but bear with me, it's how body parts are considered gothic in film and literature, because there's lots of academic sort of talk about the body as a whole, which sort of leads you into monstrosity and all that kind of thing. But we've looked at specific body parts, and in my chapter on head and face, naturally you can't talk about faces without talking about masks. So that's how, we've got masks in there. So, you can think of films like Phantom of the Opera, Eyes Without a Face, any of the slashers with the likes of Freddy and Michael Myers. And there was even a wonderful, I'm not quite sure if it was a parody or not. It was kind of like a satirical look at the slasher, Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon, which really looked into the importance of masks to the horror genre. So that's kind of the approach that we've taken. So it's obviously, the Gothic all being about sort of hidden secrets and, penetrating sort of like hidden spaces. And obviously looking beneath the mask is quite clearly penetrating a hidden space. So that's kind of how it relates into our discussion today.
That sounds very interesting and quite deep on a mental level, on an intellectual level.
Yeah, it is. I mean, at the same time, considering the fact that we're looking at sort of films as diverse as The Human Centipede. And I've even got Planet Terror in there in the discussion on the leg. It's deep, but it's also quite fun and approachable at the same time.
Very well. Generally speaking, what do masks represent for humanity? And are they generally considered evil or good, you think, or a little bit of both?
I would say it depends where you are, and also it depends on the context. So if you've got, for example, some Japanese theatre, the masks are intrinsic to the performance, so you can't have the performance without the masks. But then if you were to look at Hollywood's perception of most religions, I'm thinking of films like The Devil Rides Out here. The minute you see somebody wearing a goat mask, they're immediately considered evil. Not that Hollywood would ever pigeonhole people.
Right.
So I think it very much depends where you are as to whether they're good or evil. But I think they probably represent much the same thing in that I can't quite decide if it's the adoption of a new identity or the obscuring of your own, or if it's halfway between the two. Because I'm thinking obviously of, cultures who adopt masks of their gods in order to enact rituals and so on, using the power of those gods. Or, if it goes down the other end of the spectrum of, the highwayman wearing a mask so that people don't know who he is. I think it kind of, it's almost like a similar route, but then goes into two very different reasons for wearing a mask.
And this is just kind of bouncing off a little bit of what you were just talking about, but I want to expand on that a little bit. Why do you think we want to hide behind masks?
I'm just thinking, I went to see Phantom of the Opera on stage at London a couple of weeks ago because I'd seen the film and all the versions of it, and I've read the book and stuff. But there's a line in the film Masquerade, hide your face so the world will never find you. So I think in some cases it's almost a desire for anonymity. And I'm thinking here of things like the original sort of 18th century Venetian carnivals, where obviously people were wearing masks so they could get away with whatever they wanted because it wasn't them that had done things, it was the character wearing the mask. And I'm thinking of things like Halloween, I guess. You put on a mask so that you can basically put on a persona. So I don't necessarily know that it's that you're hiding. It's more that you're putting on something else. You're kind of play acting as something else. Mm-hmm. So I think I'm not quite sure wwhy you would want to necessarily hide, unless, as I say, it's you're hiding your identity so that you can do something else. And I guess if you're thinking of like the alter ego in this case, the best example would be someone like Batman, who's not only hiding his real identity, he's also created this whole other persona so he can run around dressed up as a bat, which sounds odd when you put it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's, I think if you did want to hide, it would probably be for more nefarious reasons, or to possibly give you more confidence. When you sort of hear of, like, we've got a comedian in the UK called Lily Savage, and Lily's actually a bit like Dame Edna Everage. It's a creation of a male performer, Paul O'Grady, and he always said that he could say things as Lily that he could never say as Paul. So I guess in a way it's not just the mask that you're putting on, it's all of the nuances and the meanings and the context, I guess, that comes with it. So it's a whole package that you're putting on, not just the mask. It's just the mask is the most recognizable part, because humans are hardwired to respond to faces, whether you like it or not. That's why people can see faces in like tree trunks and things. It's because the brain's wired to recognize them.
Yeah, I would agree, and it definitely boosts somebody's confidence whenever they put on a mask. And I would think in terms of even less than a full mask, just a layer of makeup, the confidence that gives some people just to walk out in public when they put on makeup, whether it's just for cosmetic reasons or for theatrical reasons. There's a certain sense of identity that is heightened whenever you have some type of coverage or what you're trying to project out into the public.
Oh, definitely. I think, there's a reason in the UK we sometimes refer to a woman putting on her makeup as putting on a war paint.
Yeah.
And as someone who hates going out without makeup on, there's various reasons for it, but I feel more like myself when I've chosen what I'm going to look like that day, which sounds peculiar, that you feel more yourself when you're actually artificially changing how you look.
Right.
It seems like a bit of an oxymoron, but I think there is a lot to be said for, choosing the face that you present to the world. And I think over time it sort of just becomes something that's quite ingrained. But I'm just thinking, the minute you said makeup, I just went, yes. And, when you look at, I suppose for them it was a gimmick, but like Gene Simmons to me is not Gene Simmons unless he's got the face paint on.
Right. Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and he's got some strange facial expressions, so it's hard to watch sometimes.
With and without the makeup.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned The Phantom of the Opera. Wonderful show, by the way. I've seen that a few times. I actually got to see that with the original cast on Broadway
cool.
many years ago. And I think we mentioned this when we talked to Richard Martin from Dublin, Ireland about masks. But my favorite scene in that is Act 2 when he's coming down the stairs at the ball, at the masquerade. You know, and for him, he was certainly hiding behind that because he was trying to enter into a world that nobody would recognize him and do kind of a surprise. But, you know, that whole red mask thing, you know, always stands out for me in that show. And that's, you know, that's an example where he was certainly hiding his identity. But as well, I think with that and many other examples, I think sometimes there's not just a hiding or not just a projecting, as you were talking about, but maybe... Okay, for those listening, we just had a very bizarre technical issue, and it was just like a string of really bizarre events here in our conversation with Icy. So I don't know if we're upsetting the god of masks or somebody else out there in the spirit world, because it was just bizarre. I think, Icy, I was talking before the technical hiccups about Act 2 of The Phantom of the Opera being my favorite scene, where he's coming into the masquerade. And where I was going with that was, I think sometimes it's less about hiding, and you alluded to this earlier in your conversation, when we put on a mask, and maybe more about expanded awareness or expanded creativity or something else along that line when somebody puts on a mask. What are your thoughts on something like that?
I think that can definitely be part of it, but what's really interesting about that particular scene in Phantom in the book, he's dressed as the Red Death, but he doesn't have a mask on. He uses his own face as his mask. So obviously everybody thinks he's got the most amazing mask on, and it's not, it's his actual face.
Right, I forgot about that.
But I found that quite funny, because obviously in the book, the way that his face is described is completely different from the way that the musical and the later film adaptations have gone, whereas the Lon Chaney film,
right,
I think it was much closer to the book. So it's quite interesting that for him, his face kind of is his mask, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that whole film is just kind of rife with things to discuss. But then again, it was when you were saying how you had all the masks on the wall, and I just suddenly thought of the Jim Carrey film, The Mask, and how obviously when he puts the mask on, it kind of brings this whole other side of him out. And you do have to wonder, was it there originally? You know, did he always have the potential to act in that fashion? Or was it literally just the power of the mask that actually enabled him? You know, would you then act against character because you're wearing a mask? Or sort of, so I guess it comes into the expanding awareness thing. Would it tap into something in you that was always there, or is it an artificial sort of facade that you put on?
And then we get into the quote from that movie, everybody wears a mask.
Exactly.
You know, and I think the Jim Carrey example with the mask is a great example because, like you said, are we tapping into something that's deeper within ourselves, or are we becoming something? You know, it brings to mind the idea that like shamans and medicine men, medicine women, when they would put on masks, they were doing so specifically to either be possessed by or become something else in the spirit realm. And so sometimes I think it could be tapping into something deeper, but sometimes I think it could be reaching for something that's beyond us to become that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess in a way it's almost a form of sympathetic magic. So, you know, if you want to make sure that you catch a buffalo while you're out hunting for your people, then the best way to do it is to enact that before you go, to sort of appease the spirits of whatever it is that you're hunting.
Let's talk about that for a minute. Cultural examples. What are some cultural examples or significance of masks from around the world that you can think of to highlight?
I think it's funny because whenever I sort of think of, you know, masks from a cultural point of view, I always end up thinking of the sort of like tiki masks and so on. But there's always something really deeply unfamiliar about a lot of masks when you go to, say, the British Museum and they have the different displays. And I think it's funny how, you know, the ones where they don't look like faces, if that makes sense, I find those actually quite unsettling, in much the same way that the full face Venetian masks, like the ones of like the Harlequin, I don't like them, and I think it's because they don't have any ability to emote. So they're just these fixed, immobile faces that have no expression, and sometimes all you can see is the person's eyes. And it's really difficult communicating with someone wearing a mask like that. Whereas if you then think of the more sort of stereotypical like superhero domino masks, they don't really hide your face. Why people don't recognise Green Arrow is totally beyond me. But they, because of the fact that you can still respond to the movement of the mouth and the movement of the face as a whole, I think that I don't know if it's a Western thing or not, that people prefer to have slightly more recognisable masks or not. I'm not really sure. But then, like I mentioned before, that the Japanese know cinema with their masks, it all becomes part of the performance, so it's no longer unsettling because the performance doesn't work without them.
So bringing it back, since we're in Halloween in July, bringing it back to the conversation, why are masks so important for holidays such as Halloween? And what other holidays use masks that we don't often think of?
Well, I think the first one that pops to mind is probably Mardi Gras, which obviously we don't have in this country. I suppose we'll have the Notting Hill Festival later in the year, but obviously the reasoning behind it is very, very, very different.
I need to interrupt you. I think you just want to come to New Orleans. You bring up Mardi Gras. Last time it was voodoo. I think you just want to be over here to see New Orleans.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, no, it's true. Like in the UK, the only thing I can think of that we do really do masks for, and obviously, although I will say within that, one thing that we do have a tradition of is the football fans painting their face in the colours of their team, which isn't strictly a mask, but it's still a means of aligning yourself with a tribe. I think, we don't really have mask traditions. And I don't know, I mean, Halloween these days, without being funny about it, it seems to just have descended into sort of women being a revealing version of a thing. So like slutty nurse or slutty police officer or slutty Crayola crayon, and men just wearing whatever. Superheroes currently popular, so I think the kind of the masks in Halloween's been lost a little bit. But obviously other cultures have mask traditions, and I think I always find it a little bit strange when people adopt them and don't necessarily know what the roots of that tradition are. So that would always be something that would kind of, put me off engaging in something if I didn't have a kind of an awareness of that cultural tradition.
You just don't know what you're getting into or what you're breaking down in an experience like that. So many people are just trying to appropriate things for themselves, and they have no idea the history or the tradition of things. Yeah, and the whole thing with, the sexy nurse, the sexy crayon, it's true. It's just, to me, it's a disgrace. And, Halloween has just turned into another reason to drink and party. And I don't know why we need a reason. We can drink without Halloween, but I don't know. It really has degraded into something very, very superficial.
It's quite, I dare I say, offensive in a way. But then again, at the same time, I do wonder how much. There's like an old saying that if you're lost somewhere where the fairy folk are, if you turn your clothes inside out, they can't find you. And I wonder if masks are a similar, and costumes in general are a similar association with Halloween. That because it's obviously a time when spirits are traditionally more active, in wearing a disguise of some description, although some of them aren't really disguising an awful lot, if you take my meaning. You do wonder, is that where the root of that comes from, to kind of protect yourself from the spirit world?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Certainly an interesting thought. Are there any other thoughts you'd like to share with regards to masks? And especially since you're working on an academic project, you probably have some pretty good insight. What else would you like to share on this topic?
I think it would be less something I want to share, more a recommendation I'd like to make, and that's if anybody hasn't seen it, to actually watch the Mario Bava film from 1916, The Mask of Satan. It's a cracking film, but it all kind of revolves around this bronze mask that's actually using a really interesting take on the vampire legend. And so I think that would be my big recommendation. It also goes by several other names. It's also known as Black Sunday, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce the Italian one. But yes, it's usually The Mask of the Demon, The Mask of Satan, or Black Sunday. And it's just an absolutely fantastic film if you're interested in masks.
That was a 60s? 63, you said?
Yeah, 1960.
Yeah, definitely worth looking up, especially for Halloween in July. Might be a nice thing for people to sit down and view this month. Icy, again, it's always a privilege speaking to you, and thank you so much for your insights about masks. And we'll be talking to you again later this month about another topic. But before we go, share with us again how we can find you, your writings, and the things that you're working on right now.
You can find me at icysedgwick.com, and that's Sedgwick without a second E. The variations I've had on my surname are amazing. Or you can follow me on Twitter at Icy Sedgwick, and I'm usually on there talking nonsense pretty much every day. I would plug my Facebook page, but who actually uses Facebook pages these days? So Twitter on my website is definitely the best way to get hold of it.
Very good, and we'll have those links in our show notes as well, so it's easy for people to find you. But definitely check out her work. Sign up for Icy's newsletter. You don't just get junk from Icy. It's quality content. You get free stories. You're always sending out stories on your newsletter. You've got some books to download. And, of course, your articles are always so insightful. And then, of course, interacting with you on Twitter through folklorethursday.com is just always a fun time. So there's plenty of ways for everybody to get in touch with you. And again, we just appreciate you taking the time with us today to talk about this, and hope that you have some fun in this hot season thinking about Halloween just around the corner. Always fascinating and very fun to speak with Icy. Just a very knowledgeable individual, and I love to hear her perspective on so many things. Of course, you can find her at her website, icysedgwick.com. We'll have her information in the show notes, obviously, and you'll want to go read her articles. Sign up for her newsletter. She'll send you some great stuff, great value there. Michael, let's take a little tour around Europe for a moment. The topic of masks we are on, and some interesting perspectives. Let's start over in Norway, perhaps.
Yeah, let me actually show you this, and this is a little bit off regionally. This is actually from Poland, but I want to show you this picture because it's a little creepy.
Okay, that's pretty creepy. Very interesting indeed. Explain to me what you just showed me, and perhaps we can put a picture of that up on Twitter or Instagram. But explain to me what I'm looking at.
This is tied to the tradition of mummers, and this is a Polish version. I am not even going to try to say the name. We can put it up on the show notes. But these specific costumes, men and women, particularly men, would braid straw and make costumes out of these braided ropes of straw, which in itself is a feat. I don't know how you braid straw without it breaking on you or just being altogether too itchy.
That's how you make rope, Michael.
Yeah, but straw itself, I mean, that makes sense now that you say it, but it just sounds really itchy.
Well, it may be itchy, but it's functional.
Functional, sturdy, and as these costumes show, very creepy. But these guys would actually go and celebrate Easter Monday for them, kind of like you would do Christmas caroling. But they would go into the houses and ask for donations and go perform, basically. And this is something that you actually see throughout Europe and Scandinavia, and you even see it sometimes in Ireland and Scotland.
I think I'm going to do that this Halloween. I'm going to go door to door instead of trick-or-treating. I'm going to sing to them and ask for donations.
It's a tradition. We should bring it here, actually. It's still alive.
It would be a lot of fun.
It's still alive in the world.
I think people would look at me with a strange look and just throw candy at me, and I'd be on my way.
So part of the reason, I feel like that's happened before.
It probably has, but we're not going to speak of that now.
So part of the reason we saved this for last is because as Terry Gunnell, in one of his papers, and which he later turned into a book, had brought up, a lot of academics used to believe or say that mummery or mumming was not something that originated in Scandinavia or in that northern part of Europe. And he combated that statement because a lot of, even a lot of like Viking lore is kind of lost to us because they kept more oral traditions than they kept written history. So he went back and did a lot of research and found that it definitely has deep roots there. To explain what mummery is real quick though, it's basically where you go and you find a disguise. A very specific disguise. It's not like you just go and make up a Halloween costume. These are typically going to be disguises of things like the Yule Goat or Krampus even, although that's going to a bit more dark. But what this practice allows you to do is go knock on door-to-door houses, and you're invited into a person's house, and then you either sing, dance, or act out a play. And it's pretty spectacular to think about. Like I said, it's kind of like caroling, but you're actually being invited in, and you create this stage within a living room or within a kitchen or a dining room, and you put on this performance of, being the Yule Goat or being this other character.
I feel like if I entered someone's home and created a stage and portrayed a goat, I wouldn't be there for very long.
Well, probably not here in the U.S. And that's actually a point I wanted to make, is that these costumes are kind of scary. You've done research on some of the Italian witches and
Yes.
Perkta. Those are some of the faces that you're seeing walk
Yeah.
through your door.
Wow. Yeah, I don't think I would get very far here in the States anymore. People just don't trust anymore.
Yeah,
Door to door. It's a rare thing, a
It's a different
neighborly
issue.
thing.
I feel like a lot of people, you get a knock on the door and you don't know who it is, and either it's go away, I don't know you're a threat, or go away, I really don't even want to hear what you have to say.
Well, especially if I'm dressed as a goat. You know what I mean? Or braided straw for that matter.
That would be unique.
Yeah. I want to enter your home and build a stage and do a show for you. I don't know. I don't think it would go over well.
No, probably not. But that's why I said we should bring this back, because this, like Mr.
I think
Gunnell
you have
said,
a long uphill battle to bring that back.
well, we can start it on Halloween, maybe. Do Halloween
How
carols.
about let's go to Europe and try it? It might go over a little bit better.
So his whole point of saying that, though, was that a lot of people believe that this tradition comes from southern countries and southern states, places like Africa, or even spreading so far as the Native Americans, where you have those dances and those rituals that we were talking about earlier. In I guess a lot of academics used to say that I guess there wasn't enough emotion or artistic thought at the time to bring those things up, but he argues against that and says no, that was actually very much a part of day-to-day life. And he uses a term that I actually really like, art for life. Talking about how some of those tribal countries didn't have art for art's sake. It was a religious practice. For them, it was art for life. And in this case, in the North, it's a little bit of both. It's definitely displaying beliefs and significant rituals, but it's also a performance. It's very social and very powerful.
Which, when you think about Halloween, even in our practices in modern pop culture, in Western practices, Halloween, dressing up with masks and costumes and the parties and the dances and the contests that we have, it is very artistic. And it can become extremely creative and fascinating to watch and be a part of. So Halloween in and of itself can very much be an art for life in our own modern culture.
And as we were talking about with Icy, some of that's being lost, and I think we need to, I don't even want to say fight back. I don't think it's a battle to be fought, but I think it's something that we should all strive to hold on to and deepen that almost spiritual sense of creativity that is being lost.
Yeah, it's another form of storytelling, and we've talked about it before, how storytelling is being lost upon the generations. And, the old thought of sitting around the campfire telling ghost stories, or sitting at the family dinner table and sharing stories of the day, those practices are not very common anymore, and they should be reclaimed, as should the creative aspects of what we're talking about here. There's such a richness to life in all of this. And I think we miss out when we don't practice this and engage in this at some level.
So what you're saying is we need to find a goat mask and
What
some
I'm saying
straw.
is that I'm going to my neighbor's house tomorrow, and I'm going to be dressed up as a goat. I'm going to enter and do a goat dance for him.
A goat
And
dance.
I'm going to see how far I get.
What is a goat dance
Before-
exactly?
You will see perhaps tomorrow, because I might be goat dancing all the way back to our house. With him chasing me. I don't know. We'll see. If anybody out there has any video of them doing a goat dance, then please do share.
Or don't. I'm not sure which. But I think that should conclude our thoughts, or not conclude, but I think that ties it all together. I mean, we see a common thread, like we were talking about earlier, where you become these characters, and whether it is for ritual, or whether it is a possession of sorts, or even if it's just to go and have community with your next door neighbors. There's something very powerful and very magical about masks to this day.
There are, and like I said, I think I mentioned with Icy, there's an expanded awareness. There's a creative outlet. There's a passion. When you speak of theater or the arts, there's a great passion wrapped up within this practice and within this tradition. And it's very exciting to watch and be a part of. So definitely art for life. I like that term as well. And I mean, on the flip side of all that, there's definitely the conversation to be had about the symbolic, or the emotional, or even the spiritual masks that we wear in day-to-day life, and how we hide behind that. Sometimes we even cower behind that, or we create a facade to protect ourselves from what we perceive the world seeing us as. There's all kinds of conversation to be had about masks and their implications and what they mean and so forth. So it's a grand topic, to be sure. I think we have to reach back, like we've done a little bit here tonight, and look at the traditions from around the world and realize that there's a great spiritual significance to the practice and the art of wearing masks.
And the creation of masks.
And the creation of masks. Which, by the way, I think I'm going to post on Twitter and Instagram some of the masks that we've created, or the masks that we have hanging up around our studio here, our little studio room, and others that we've taken on the road doing live shows. I'll post some of those images up. If you guys have some masks that you'd like to share with us, go ahead and post those up. We'd love to see them. Twitter, Instagram. Give us some look at some of your previous masks, or masks that you hold in high regard. I might even try to find that Phantom of the Opera red mask somewhere so people can see, because that's a beautiful piece.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to send you this creepy picture that I just showed you. So we
oh my
can throw it up
gosh,
for people to
and
see.
I'm going to have to share that with everybody because it's pretty wild. Folks, thanks for hanging out with us, and thank you to Richard Martin and to Icy Sedgwick for hanging out with us tonight on the Monster Guys podcast. Part 2, Halloween in July, Oh, the Masks We Wear. I hope you got something out of that. Please visit us at patreon.com/The Monster Guys. Throw a tip in the tip jar. Leave us a positive review on iTunes, and sign up for our newsletter and get involved. Over the past week, we've enjoyed hanging out with you on Twitter and Instagram, sharing some pictures and some Halloween memories. Let's keep that going and help each other refresh a little bit as we think about the most wonderful time of the year, and that is Halloween. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.